Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Heilman Haver in the Mix. Today we're going to be celebrating our recent interview with director, producer, and screenwriter Danny Bilson. Danny's episode, number 17 of Heilman Haver, the podcast, is going to debut, actually debuted yesterday, so Friday the 26th. And we just really thought it was awesome time. Had a lot of fun.
It was a lot of laughs. What a bunch of great stories he's got. I mean, growing up in Hollywood.
Yes.
Involved in some of the classic TV shows, the movies. I mean, when you listen to the podcast, it's just a laundry list of things he's been involved in. So he's got stories about everybody, and
it was very difficult to keep it under an hour, I'll tell you that much. But thankfully, he's been gracious enough to join us again in the future, he said. So we're excited for that. But kind of as a thank you, we decided to dedicate this episode of In the Mix to Danny Bilson and his career and some of the movies and that he's made and projects he's been involved in. Again, he's a screenwriter, director, and producer, best known for Disney's 1991 aviation adventure, The Rocketeer. Folks our age should remember The Rocketeer, and hopefully the new generation has seen it a few times as well on Disney Plus. It's a great movie.
Not to mention the new animated series on Disney is at Disney Junior,
right?
Which is interesting. They brought some of the original cast from the movie in for some of the voices and some tie-ins that we can talk about when we go through some trivia.
Yeah, we got some fun trivia to share. And the other exciting thing is that Danny Bilson recently partnered up with none other than Spike Lee on the movie Da 5 Bloods. Hopefully you've had a chance to get on our Facebook page and read Greg's review of Da 5 Bloods. It was really insightful, I thought. It was an excellent piece, and you'll learn a lot about the movie. And it's definitely worth a watch. It's on Netflix, available right now. And the rumor mill has already been churning, and it looks like this is going to be up for probably a couple of different Oscars. Best Picture and also Best Director for Spike.
Yeah, every awards show that's out there, I know Golden Globes, the Writers Guild, not Writers Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, the SAG Awards. Mm-hmm. There's nominations in various categories. I think Danny was joking that everything but screenplay, but it's notwithstanding, I think it's an excellent screenplay.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's had a lot of fun things to say. Really, very impressed with working with Spike Lee, and so definitely check out the podcast. There's some fun behind-the-scenes stuff, again, from his childhood all the way up through working with Spike and the gang on this new movie, Da 5 Bloods. As a thank you to him, we're going to salute him with a cocktail that's named after his first hit that he wrote with his writing partner, the late Paul DeMeo, and it is
The Rocketeer.
How appropriately named.
The Rock-a-who?
That's right.
So this, I think we're seeing a common theme here with our drinks. We have a lot of gin drinks on this show.
A lot of classic Hollywood cocktails.
Yeah.
A lot of gin drank back in those days.
Yeah, so this is gin, Maraschino Liqueur, and a new one for us, Creme de Violette, which we've not had before, but smells fantastic.
Yeah, it really does.
So we're going to mix this up. 2 ounces of gin. And since there's 2 of us, obviously I'm going to double this up. We'll go 4 ounces.
And Aviator Gin. There's a lot of airplanes.
Yes,
and flying
that's true.
In general.
And speaking of that, we'll get the trivia later. So I'm not gonna put the cart before the horse. So we're gonna go with an ounce of the.
In this case, the wagon
liqueur.
before the horse.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Already smells good.
Then we're gonna go with an ounce of lemon juice, which is pre-squeezed, and a half ounce of the Creme de Violette, which smells phenomenal.
Easy enough to find?
Yeah, it's Total Wine. I got this at Purdy Liquor in Purdy, outside of Gig Harbor.
For you Kitsap folks.
But,
and of course, we'll have this all listed, the recipe in the show notes.
All right, so let's give this a shake. Let's get our little
look at these.
scoops here.
All right.
Bought those for our port, but I think they'll work here. Little shake.
Cool color.
Yeah, it's kind of got that violet-ish.
Now, violets are edible, correct? I assume, since they've made this liqueur out of it. You can almost garnish it with a little...
Yeah, the recipe calls for garnish with a lime wedge, but you could easily garnish it with
fancy
whatever
as you want to get. Huh?
All right, well, cheers. And to Danny Bilson.
Indeed. Wow.
Definitely herbal.
definitely herbal, definitely citrusy, plenty of lemon juice in there.
Yeah. And then I'm getting the cherry, but a little bit later.
Yeah, very very late, but definitely floral, and almost a grape. Maybe that's the cherry.
Well, I think it's also the violet. I think smells. You take. Yeah, there's a grape to it.
Yeah, there is. Very fragrant, and great color.
That's good.
Really good. Yeah, I think we got a winner there.
Yeah.
So a little more about Danny. Danny was born in 1956 in LA, and he was born into a writing dynasty. We were doing our research and went back a couple of generations. His grandfather, George, was a producer, writer, director, and the head of the trailer department at Warner Brothers. And this is really cool. His grandmother, Hattie, interviewed stars for fan magazines and then went on to write shorts for RKO. So that's a pretty groundbreaking thing for a woman to have done at that time period. I thought that was pretty cool. And then his father, Bruce Bilson, was producer, writer, director, and he actually ended up working with Danny on the show The Flash in the early 90s. But he was also involved in like almost every classic television show ever made. Andy Griffith, Hawaii Five-0, The Brady Bunch, MASH, Green Acres, Hogan's Heroes, Get Smart, and The Odd Couple.
These are all the shows I used to watch when I'd stay home sick from school.
Yeah.
I mean, Hogan's Heroes was a daily thing, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Get Smart, towards the evening. Classic shows. MASH. We talked about MASH.
We did talk about MASH. Yeah, without giving away too much, Danny talked about being on the sets. Some of his earliest memories are being on some of these sets, running around with plastic machine guns on the set of Get Smart. It's pretty cool stuff. So he had a really interesting childhood. We probably could have talked about that by itself.
Yeah.
But, he went on and graduated from California State University, San Bernardino, and it was there that he met and teamed up with his eventual best friend and longtime writing partner of over 40 years.
42 years?
Yeah.
I think we covered that in the podcast, yeah.
Paul DeMeo. And together they founded Pet Fly Productions. And he also took classes from a couple of heavy hitters. We talk a lot on the podcast about John Milius, who was the writer of Apocalypse Now, and there's some cool tie-ins we'll get to a little later when we talk about The Five Bloods with Apocalypse Now.
I noticed that when I watched it, yeah.
Yep. And then and also Jack Epps, who penned Top Gun. So pretty cool. And Bilson and DeMeo produced their first script. It was called Trancers in 1985, and he's big into noir, I've noticed. But he did share with us he really loves that classic era.
Yeah.
Understandably, lived through it. But it was about a time-traveling detective from the future. Apparently it became a cult classic. I have not seen it, but I'm going to go out and watch it. They said the narrative was so engaging that it evolved into a franchise that generated 5 sequels. So not too bad. And as of 2020, for you Rotten Tomatoes people, it holds an 83% freshness score still. So not too bad. The other cool thing, this is something we got to on the podcast, but he wrote a lot of 4 different video games, James Bond video games for EA games. And he actually, speaking of Bond and the Rocketeer, he shared with us a time that he was on set of the Rocketeer and got involved in the middle of an argument between actor Paul Sorvino, one of the, probably best known gangster actors of all time, got Goodfellas, and Timothy Dalton.
Yeah,
James Bond himself.
I thought about that after we finished recording that,
Yeah.
and I thought, all right, you're on set with Timothy Dalton and Paul Sorvino. Now, granted, Timothy Dalton was still kind of up and coming, but Paul Sorvino is Paul Sorvino, and it's incredible just to think of that. But it's nothing to him when you grow up in that setting. Look at his grandmother, right? With interviewing stars for fan magazines. I mean, his family was right in the center of the whole, classic Hollywood.
In his blood, and you really do see that in The Rocketeer. One of our questions centered around the kind of research that he does when he writes a period piece. The Five Bloods obviously involves Vietnam, the veterans returning to Vietnam, and The Rocketeer set in the 1930s. So now, Greg, this is your favorite movie. You've probably seen it more than any other film, you think?
Yeah, for sure. So I bought it on VHS. I bought it on a DVD, Blu-ray. It's the first thing I watched on Disney Plus. I've tried to force it down my family's throat. I don't think they're as big of fans as I am, but still, I was trying to think why I like it so much, and I think a lot of it has to do with it's that romanticized a version of Hollywood. It's almost the kind of thing that when I watched La La Land a few years ago,
Right.
it's that same kind of classic romanticized Hollywood, but it's also the classic movie tropes. You know,
Yes.
it's a very Hays Code-ish film in that, you know, the bad things happen to the bad guys, the good things happen to the good guys, and it all kind of wraps up nice and tidy at the end. Plus, you know, the comic book element. But
A lot of red, white, and blue in the movie too. It's
Yeah.
very patriotic.
Yeah.
Even Paul Sorvino's character, who I might make my living under the table, whatever he says, but I'm an American.
yeah, so it's you know, a funny thing. A couple of things that you know, you notice that when you watch it a couple of times, you realize at the end, Neville Sinclair's in the blimp, and he says, "I'll miss Hollywood." And then he did. He hit the Hollywood land sign,
That's right.
knocked land off, but missed Hollywood. So little subtle things like that. And you had, you know, and even other Disney films, there's kind of this thing. You had the Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? So you had Eddie Valiant versus Eddie Valentine, and you had the Hollywood land sign in that too. And there's always these scenes where the land falls off of the Hollywood land, which was the housing development,
Right.
which is the Hollywood land housing development. But Griffith Observatory, I think I think I looked at this, 300 films in
Wow,
total
no kidding.
have Griffith Observatory in it. A couple, you know, La La Land did, Rebel Without a Cause did. Ton of big films were filmed up there. But I think it's really the, and I wanted to mention Tomorrowland, right? The movie Tomorrowland, the kid with the rocket pack, there was a couple of homages to Rocketeer. Beeman's Gum was in that. The kind of flying through the laundry and the wheat field like Cliff Secord does in Rocketeer. So it's become a cult classic.
It has.
Really, it didn't really do well, and Danny alludes to this in the podcast in the interview that it didn't do as well. He wished it would have. They could have made a sequel, which would have been awesome. But it's really become kind of a cult thing, and I think it's just a really happy, fun, escapist film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I always have a special place in my heart for those types of movies. I think of, like you said, La La Land. Another kind of cheap, might sound a little cheesy, but Hail Caesar is another one that I really enjoy. It's set in that. I mean, it's a movie about movies, and it's Hollywood's making a movie about Hollywood, and I think they like those the most.
Yeah. Well, we
see a
talked
lot,
about that when we did our Mank review.
Mank's another one, yeah.
Is that Hollywood loves movies about Hollywood. That's
Right.
why they love The Artist. They love La La Land. They love these movies where even if you poke fun at it, they just love movies about themselves, which, it's Hollywood.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, so fun film. I introduced my 13-year-old daughter, Sophie, to it this last weekend, and she loved it immediately. I think it's, like you said, it's just got kind of every element, There's Nazis, there's mobsters, there's, but everything works out okay in the end.
And
there's airplanes, there's beautiful girls. It's every 14-year-old boy's, dream.
and a wonderful James Horner soundtrack.
Yeah, fantastic soundtrack.
Yeah.
And I got to say, Timothy Dalton made a fantastic villain. I really, with the pencil mustache and the sword fighting.
And he was modeled after Errol Flynn.
Right.
And there's even a comment about, who are they going to believe the third biggest box office star or whatever, and obviously it was Errol Flynn at that point was arguably the third biggest.
And let's not forget Alan Arkin.
Oh.
I mean, enough said.
Yeah.
With hair. With hair. In this one.
But interesting, Lloyd Bridges turned that role down.
Oh,
There's a couple of interesting casting things. I was going through the research of it. Lloyd Bridges originally was offered that part. He turned it down. Let's see. Joe Pesci turned down Eddie Valentine.
Oh, wow. That would have been
Yeah, so...
totally different film, but
Yeah.
I still would have watched with either of those.
And then Johnny Depp turned down Cliff Secord, which I don't know. I don't know if I could have. He probably would have been okay, but I think Billy Campbell was good as Cliff Secord. But then Johnny Depp went on to Pirates as a result of that. If he had gotten this role, he wouldn't have moved on to be able to do Pirates. So things kind of worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. So that's then, this is now, and Danny he said that he is now the most productive he's ever been. He unfortunately lost Paul DeMeo, his writing partner, several years ago. but he is more productive than ever, and he has tons of different projects in the hopper. And The Five Bloods is again out on Netflix right now. You should go out and check that out. And we got some fun trivia about that as well. It was originally titled The Last Tour, and it was written by Danny and Paul to tell the story of 4 aging white vets who were headed back to Vietnam. Ollie Stone was attached to it at one point as potential director, but he made a few changes, then moved on. And there's quite a bit of influence from the movie Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart, and apparently that led to our producer Lloyd Levin read in an interview that Spike Lee's favorite film was Treasure of Sierra Madre, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And Lee liked the premise, and he and his co-writer Kevin Wilmot, who we're hoping to get on the show in the future as well with Danny, rewrote the script, and they made it about black soldiers. And Danny kind of describes that process and how it really brought the movie into its own as soon as Spike got a hold of it.
It really did. It amplified it. I think it would have been good, more than good on its own, but you add the elements that Spike did. I think the collaboration really just amplified the message of it.
And this was, unfortunately, the final film of Chadwick Boseman to be released in his lifetime. He has one other Netflix film that's going to be released later. It's called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Which is actually available now.
Oh, it's available now? Okay,
yep.
Great. And he was actually working on both films while undergoing cancer therapy.
Yeah. And an interview with Spike Lee, he kept it so secret. Nobody knew. I mean, Spike Lee didn't know. He was amazed at how hard he worked and how well he worked, even going through what he was going through. It's amazing.
Well, and Paul DeMeo as well. When Paul was ill, he told Danny he'd like one more credit, and I'm really pulling for this for an Oscar for something. Maybe not screenplay, but best picture, best director for that final nod to Paul. It was actually a challenging interview to do with Danny because it was very emotional.
Yeah.
He's lost a lot of friends, and to work with someone for 40 years would be would be tough to have that person missing. But that's a really cool nod to him, I think. If they get an award. So, as far as the Apocalypse Now references. They're numerous, and perhaps as a tribute to Danny's influential teacher, again, the writer of the film, John Milius. There's a nightclub it's named after and shows artwork for the classic film, and there's the famous Wagner piece, Flight of the Valkyries, also plays during a scene in which the men are traveling on a boat going down the river, and just as they do in Apocalypse Now, actually. And it's also a reference to obviously the original Joseph Conrad book, Heart of Darkness, which is what really got that whole movie going. Originally, was Orson Welles wanted to make that movie. I don't think it ever got made, but it ended up being Apocalypse Now, and that worked out okay.
Yeah.
So, and this is The Five Bloods is Spike Lee's first feature film on Netflix. So, again, go read Greg's review, and then go watch the movie, and go listen to the podcast at some point in there.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, and we've talked about this, the whole streaming and how streaming is changing the landscape of film distribution and things like that. I've noticed that while there's a lot of studios and there's been a big complaint against Hollywood with sequels and where's the originality and things like that, I've noticed on Netflix and some of these other streaming services that you're seeing a lot more creative, almost independent films being released on some of these streaming services. And it could be budget, it could be the way distribution's done. I want to get some people on the podcast, and we're working on this to talk about how distribution is done and things like that, to give us a little more insight into the differences between distributing to a theater versus streaming.
You got the big Warner Brothers news. They're going to be releasing all their films to, limited release theaters, obviously, because theaters are still opening back up, but also directly to HBO Max. Yeah. And that caused some major waves. So COVID has impacted things a lot, but I almost think that some of this was moving that direction anyway, and COVID kind of gave it the push. So we'll keep our finger on the pulse of how things are going.
And we're also looking into some of the financial aspects, because you look at Disney makes $10 billion at the box office a couple of years ago. So how does that translate when things are released to streaming? They've had Soul released to streaming. They've had kind of the Mulan and Raya and the Last Dragon are both kind of that premiere access. Then they're going to have another Pixar film. I think it's this summer coming out directly on on streaming. I'm not. Don't quote me on that. But then other films like there's a Black Widow. I think that they're holding out for a theater release. So it's going to be interesting to see how they capture that monetarily from from films that are released on streaming versus theaters, or a combination, because it's obviously can't be apples to apples when you're looking at strict theater releases against theater releases.
Right, and I think that it speaks a lot to the power of streaming services when you have someone like a Spike Lee who's willing to take a film like this and just go right to Netflix with it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're still in the contention for these big pictures, because some consumers may not care about the Oscars. It may be, well, it's Hollywood on Hollywood type of thing, but it still does matter when it comes to selling the film and marketing the film. So
yeah, and well, you also look at films, the George Clooney's new film, which we reviewed, Nomadland, which is the next film we're going to be reviewing, and that's available on Hulu. So and that's definitely going to be at the very least the Best Picture nominee.
Right.
So a lot of these, and it's also one of the advantages of the Oscars being pushed so late, is we're going to have a chance this year, unlike other years, to watch everything everything's going to be released well in advance of the awards show. So, and we can sit and watch them from streaming services. And
we're also going to be able to have some returning guests to talk about the Oscars and the awards season. We're going to talk again to Matthew Turner from London, and we're going to talk to Jeremy Arnold from Turner Classic Movies as we get a little closer to awards season. So glad to see them coming back, and hopefully we'll get Danny Bilson back on again too. So
he's got a lot in the works.
Yeah, these guys have been great sports, and again, we cheers all of our guests, and thank you, our viewers, for tuning in and liking these videos. We enjoy making them, and hope you're enjoying them as well. Make yourself a cocktail. Go out and watch The Rocketeer. Go out and watch The Five Bloods, and tune in for next week for Tim Conway Jr. talking about classic Hollywood, the eldest son of none other than comedian Tim Conway from The Carol Burnett Show. That's going to be released probably next weekend. We're interviewing on Friday, so maybe a couple-day delay, but we're excited for that one. And
that's going to be a fun one, too.
It will be. Talk about a guy who grew up in the midst of it all.
Yeah.
So that's coming up next week, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and cheers to Danny Bilson and The Rocketeer. Talk to you guys next time.